Okay. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 2025 Virtual Risk Management Conference. Before we begin, we have a message from Ed Malaspina, CEO and President of HAI Group.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Ed Malaspina, President and CEO here at HAI Group, and I want to thank you for joining us for HAI Group's 7th Annual Risk Conference. It's great to see so many familiar names and a lot of new ones as well, coming together from across the country for the session. Last year, we had a record turnout of nearly 700 registrants, and that really spoke to the passion and dedication in this community. This year, we're building on that energy with a focus on something that touches all of us: business continuity and crisis response. Whether you're managing day-to-day risks or preparing for the unexpected, today's sessions are designed to give you practical tools and fresh ideas you can bring back to your organization. Thank you for all that you do in keeping our community safe, resilient, and ready for whatever comes next. I hope you enjoy the day, and let's get right into the sessions.
Okay. Thank you, Ed, for that introduction. We are going to jump right into our first session, which will really lay the groundwork for a lot of the discussions we'll have throughout the day. So our first speaker is Kelly McElwain, and she is the Director of Research at PAHRC, which stands for Public and Affordable Housing Research Corporation, which is the research division of HAI Group. Kelly is responsible for managing PAHRC's data tools, research, and webinars on affordable housing programs. Her research focuses on affordable housing preservation and the initiatives housing providers undertake to improve resident outcomes. Kelly will be talking about some of the trends and numbers behind natural disasters and how these affect public and affordable housing. And we'll also speak briefly on some physical strategies you can implement to boost resilience on your sites. Please feel free to submit questions using the Q&A feature, and we'll do our best to address these at the end of the session. This session is going to be recorded and sent out to all registered attendees after the event, so keep an eye on your inbox after the conference wraps up. Kelly, I'm going to go on mute and let you take it from here.
Thanks, Mary. So a crucial component of any business continuity plan is identifying the risks that your organization faces and the potential impact that they may have on your operations. In recent years, we've seen growth in both the frequency, intensity, and geographic reach of natural disasters. Events that were once considered rare, like major hurricanes and wildfires, are happening more and more frequently. And these weather events are happening in places that were once less common. They can destroy properties, displace residents and employees, reduce operating revenue, impact vendors, and disrupt access to power and vital supplies. And that's why it's important to examine how weather patterns are evolving as you develop your business continuity plan. So to set the stage today, I'm going to begin with an overview of some of the natural hazard trends across the U.S. And then I'm going to share some findings of one of PAHRC's recent reports that assesses the potential negative impacts that natural hazards can have on affordable rental properties. After that, I'll share some tools that you can use to begin assessing natural hazard risks in your community. And these can help you evaluate which severe weather events your organization can consider including in your preparedness, business continuity plans, and mitigation strategies. And then Mary is going to close with some property management strategies your organization can implement to mitigate these risks before they strike. So there are two types of disasters that can impact your portfolio. There's natural disasters, which can include things like floods, hurricanes, and tornadoes. Then there are man-made disasters. This can include things like train derailments, arson, or cyber attacks. And while it's important to plan for both, we're going to be focusing on natural disasters throughout today's session. And natural disasters are increasing in frequency and intensity. In 2024 alone, there were 27 confirmed weather and climate disasters with more than $1 billion in losses impacting the US. And we're seeing that 2024 had the second highest number of billion-dollar disasters since NOAA began keeping track in 1980. The total cost from these disasters was an estimated $182 billion. So what are some of the factors driving these trends? One is the increasing frequency and severity of precipitation. Floods are among the most common and deadly natural disasters. They affect every region of the country and cause severe property damage each year. And between 1996 and 2019, 99% of counties were impacted by floods. We're also seeing that they're occurring in areas that were not traditionally marked as flood zones. And this map displays how much precipitation across the country has changed over the past century. And as you can see, we're finding more precipitation in the South, Northeast, and Midwest. But it's more than just the amount of precipitation. It's also about how the rain is being delivered. Increasingly, rain isn't falling in a consistent way across the year. There's been an increase in microburst storms, which are short duration storms with a significant amount of rainfall in a short period of time. And these storms have the potential to flood rivers and stormwater management systems. And how this manifests is that these flooding events have caused more than a third of natural hazard catastrophe related fatalities since 2011. And as a result, Swiss Re, a reinsurer, has stated that flood is by far the most frequently occurring natural perils and is the leading cause of monetary damage from natural hazards. And flood risk can be based on many factors. This can include heavy rainfall, storm surges, and even snowmelt. And each of these hazards is forecast and assessed differently and can be triggered by other weather events like hurricanes and severe thunderstorms. So, how can flood impact your portfolio? Well, one consideration is going to be natural factors. Are you in an area that's seeing a lot of rainfall or an increase in rainfall? Are you near a river or the coast? Or is your property near a slope that can carry stormwater runoff towards your property? Another consideration is man-made factors. This has to do with how your property and the land around it has been altered to make it more livable. This can include things like pavement, storm drains, and large irrigation projects. And as more and more people are moving into urban areas, more asphalt is covering soil. And this can make it harder for rainwater to be absorbed by the ground. And this means that cities are increasingly reliant on stormwater drains, which were often built decades ago when microburst storms were not as common. Also, these drains can get blocked if debris falls in it. And as a result, these factors are coming together to create risks for affordable housing providers. Floods can lead to structural damage to buildings, damage to HVAC and electrical components, displace tenants, lead to power outages, and the loss of rental income during potentially lengthy repairs. And ensuring that your buildings have proper drainage, that critical systems are elevated, and that your buildings are compliant with the latest codes can help protect your property from the risks that floods may pose. Another natural hazard to watch is extreme heat. While heat may not have as many direct impacts on your building, it's important to consider to keep your residents and staff safe. Heat is the leading cause of weather-related deaths in the US, and heat stress can lead to the increased risk of heart attack, stroke, and breathing problems. And nationwide, we're seeing that unusually hot summer days are becoming more common over the last few decades. And as a result, the risk of heat-related deaths is expected to rise. And these risks are accentuated by the heat island effect, which can lead to higher temperatures in urban areas where tree canopy is less common and heat absorbing pavement is prevalent. Older adults, young children, and people with certain medical conditions may be particularly vulnerable to heat related risks. Studies have also found that low-income households are particularly vulnerable to the negative effects of heat as well. And this means that your residents could be at elevated exposure. And doing what you can to ensure that your units and properties remain cool during these hot summer days can help protect your residents. This can include things like installing heat drapes to block out the sun and backup generators for buildings, particularly those serving vulnerable populations. Wildfires are another growing natural hazard risk. The season for wildfires is occurring earlier and lasting longer. And as a result, more acres are burning. Historically, the amount of area burns peaked in August, but more recently, it's been peaking in July. And researchers have linked this longer season to warmer springs, longer summer dry seasons, drier soils and vegetation, and land use practices, infest, uh, insect infestations, fuel availability, and fire suppression factors can also impact frequency and intensity. While wildfires tend to burn more land in the western US, their impacts can extend even farther. Wildfires can pose a threat to the health and safety of residents and the broader community by triggering air pollution, which could exacerbate health challenges and result in broader utility and transportation outages. Another risk to affordable housing providers is convection storms and the powerful thunderstorms, hail, and strong wind that they can produce. We're seeing that the hail from these storms is lasting longer and getting bigger. And the tornadoes, hail, and strong winds can damage roofs, break windows, damage vehicles, and cause walls to buckle. And damaged roofs and windows can also lead to water damage inside the home and pose safety risks to your residents and staff. And this is a top claim driver, specifically strong winds and hail damage for HAI groups. So it's certainly something to consider. Tornadoes and the convection storms they're commonly formed in, the risk for those increase as the traditional tornado alley shifts east towards larger population centers and the number of storms occurring in a given day increase. So across the US, there are three regions that generally have a high frequency of tornadoes. One is Florida, which has many tornadoes due to the high frequency of thunderstorms and tropical storms in the region. Another is Tornado Alley in the south central US, which is prone to the formation of these supercell thunderstorms. And then a third is Dixie Alley in the Gulf Coast. Another risk to consider is earthquakes. Recent research suggests that nearly 3/4 of the US could experience potentially damaging earthquakes. New tools have allowed scientists to identify 500 additional faults, which could produce potentially damaging quakes. And these studies have found that the Northeast, California, Alaska, and Hawaii could have a greater chance of shaking than previous projections have suggested. And while no one can predict earthquakes, understanding where these fault lines are and the location of past quakes have helped scientists predict where they may occur in the future and how intense they may be. And ensuring that your properties are built to modern seismic codes will be your organization's best line of defense for earthquakes. Another emerging trend is that there's been a decrease in the number of cold weather days. Since the 1980s, cold weather days are becoming less common throughout the country, but especially in the Western US. However, even though extremely cold weather is becoming less frequent, it's still critical to prepare and plan for cold weather to help keep your properties and residents safe. Cold snaps can still occur, and when they do, they can pose a big threat, particularly to older buildings or communities that are not prepared. One of HAI Group's other claim drivers is frozen pipes. And ultimately, pipes that are uninsulated or too cool can burst during a freeze, which can lead to water damage. Older systems, heating systems that fail when temperatures drop can also put your residents and property at risk. And ensuring that your properties are properly warmed and maintaining these systems can help avert some of these losses. Like the number of cold snaps, we're also seeing that total snowfall has decreased across many areas of the country. Specifically in the Pacific Northwest and areas in the Midwest have seen a decrease in the amount of snow. However, it is increasing in some areas, specifically the Great Lakes. And similarly, even though snowfall may be becoming less common in some areas, it's still important to prepare. Without proper preparation, even a single severe weather event can cause severe damage. Snow and ice accumulation can put stress on roofs, gutters, and trees, which can lead to leaks, collapses, and falling branches or power outages. Melting snow can cause flooding around foundations, while ice buildup can lead to slip hazards. By planning ahead to clear, reinforce roofs and test heating systems and establish a plan for snow removal can help keep your property safe. So as the frequency and impacts of severe weather events climb, our team has tried to better understand their potential impact that natural hazards could have on affordable housing specifically. And we tackled this question in one of our recent reports, Natural Hazards and Federally Assisted Housing. We examined where affordable properties were located in relation to 18 natural hazards. And when I say affordable housing in the context of this report, I'm referring to properties that receive things like a subsidized mortgage, tax credits, or subsidies from some federal program in exchange for charging rents that are affordable to low-income households. And one of the reasons that we conducted this study is because prior research has found that rental housing experiences more damage and recovers more slowly from disasters. And this can be because multifamily and duplex structures take longer to repair, landlords and renters have fewer incentives to invest in mitigation features, and they may be less likely to receive federal disaster funds. Lower cost rental housing is even more vulnerable to the effects of disaster. This is because it is often older, could be in poorer condition due to federal disinvestment, and in more risk-prone areas. These properties also operate on smaller margins and may have less access to those recovery resources, making it difficult to invest in some of those mitigations and repairs. Additionally, many of these properties house vulnerable resident populations, many of which should have fewer resources to prepare and evacuate. So to do this, we use FEMA's National Risk Index, also known as the NRI. And the NRI quantifies the potential negative impacts resulting from 18 natural hazards, including things like riverine flooding, earthquakes, tornadoes, hurricanes, wildfire, to name a few. And the NRI assesses risk as a function of expected annual loss, social vulnerability, and community resiliency. Expected annual loss is a combination of the value of property and the number of people that are exposed to a natural hazard, as well as the probability of that event occurring and the value of previous damage. While social vulnerability represents the degree to which people living in an area would suffer from a natural hazard occurrence. And community resiliency reflects the degree to which people in an area are prepared for a natural hazard and could quickly recover. And using the NRI, we found that nearly 1.2 million affordable homes, representing a quarter of the affordable housing stock, are in census tracts with the highest risk of negative impacts from natural hazards nationwide. And nearly 1.5 million affordable homes are in census tracts with the highest risk of negative impacts from natural hazards relative to other areas within their states. And affordable homes are more likely to be in areas with the greatest risk of negative impacts within their state compared to both renter and owner occupied homes generally. And looking at the 18 hazards included in the NRI, we found that 19% of affordable homes are in communities with the highest risk for hazard-related losses nationally. And over a half of affordable homes are in census tracts with the highest social vulnerability scores. And this is higher than both renter and owner occupied homes generally. And it suggests that many communities where affordable properties are located likely have fewer social and economic resources and face greater challenges after a disaster. We also found that 19% of affordable homes are in counties with the lowest ranking community resilience scores. And generally, the South and West tend to have a greater share of affordable homes in census tracts at the greatest risk of negative impacts from natural hazards, while the Midwest and Northeast have lower shares at risk. More than half of affordable homes in areas like Florida, California, Oregon, Utah, South Dakota, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Washington are in census tracts with the greatest risk of negative impacts. However, if you're in other areas, you're not necessarily in the clear. While this map shows areas that are more prone to impacts from natural hazards historically, risks are increasing nationwide, and it's important to be aware of the specific challenges threatening your community. And a loss to even one property could be detrimental to the communities that you serve, given the large unmet need for affordable housing. And when risk is determined relative to other areas within their state, the share of affordable homes in areas with the highest potential impacts from natural hazard increases. Areas in the Northeast and West tend to have a larger share of their affordable homes in neighborhoods with the highest risk within their state. And looking at the individual risks that make up the NRI, we found that most affordable homes are in areas with at least high risk for one of the 18 hazards included in the NRI. The most common threats that could potentially impact residents and or affordable housing properties generally included heat wave, strong wind, tornadoes, lightning, riverine flooding, and winter weather. So, the first step in disaster preparedness is to know your risks. And knowing which hazards exist in your community can help you develop an informed business continuity and disaster preparedness plan. So now I'm going to share some tools that can be your first line in planning efforts to help you understand the potential risks that your properties and residents may face. However, I want to caution that these tools do not replace an individualized hazard assessment. And just because a property may be in a low risk area, as noted by these tools, doesn't mean they could never experience a disaster. And these tools that I'm about to share are, as I said, a starting place. For more insight into local preparedness and mitigation activities, you can contact your local emergency planning department or risk control consultant. They should have additional localized hazard assessments for your local planning department and strategies to help mitigate risks with local factors in mind. And these tools also generally do not take into account mitigations that your organization or community are taking and do not account for changes in climate conditions that could alter your risk in the future. So it's a point in time snapshot based off of historical trends. Affordable housing providers can use these tools to identify properties and populations that could be at elevated risk and inform those mitigation plans, as I mentioned. You can also use it to evaluate which hazards pose to which of your development sites and inform how new properties are built in a way to reduce risk with these hazards in mind. They can also help you identify where those additional assessments may be needed and that consider the physical characteristics of your buildings. They can help you collect data for grant applications and disaster preparedness and mitigation projects. Can also help you communicate risks to residents and make the case for including affordable housing in your local preparedness mitigation plans. And understanding your area's risk profile can also help you assess your organization's insurance needs. So, historically, most maps have focused on a single disaster type. But over the past decade, there's been increased focus on developing tools that look holistically at all of the ways that different risks work together to pose challenges to communities. And FEMA's National Risk Index, which I've talked about a bit already, is one of those tools. And the NRI can be used to assess exposure to the potential impact that hazards pose to communities. And this tool generates reports at both the census tract and county level. And you can look at things like expected annual loss, social vulnerability, and community resiliency. So I'm just going to pull up that tool to show you how quick and easy it is to do. So it'll take you to the US at large, and you can toggle the map to look at specific hazards over here if you're interested in a specific threat. And then you can search your community. So in this case, I'm going to go to Tampa, Florida. and it will zoom and pan to your area of interest. It'll start by showing the county level data, but if you want to get more neighborhood level view, you can switch to census tract view. You can then zoom in as you need and then click on a census tract, and a report will be generated that will display relative risk relative to both the nation and within other areas within the state, depending on your local context. And it will show you all of those 18 hazards included in the NRI. You can download this report. You can also compare it against other census tracts, and you can change it to look at specific characteristics that are included in the NRI. And it's a great way to understand the risks that potential challenges that your portfolio could face. The data is also downloadable. So if you have a list of properties in your region, you can match it against either the county or the census tract ID. And if you are interested in help with this, you can feel free to contact me, and I'm happy to point you in the right direction to link this information to your property portfolio. Another tool that you may find helpful is Columbia Climate School's U.S. Natural Hazard Index. This map displays the risks that 14 natural hazards across the U.S. Could pose at the census tract level. And it also includes that multiple hazard index as well, if you want to look at that. So I'll open this as well, just to show you how easy it is. While it loads. And it's super simple. You can change the map layers here. By default, it's going to show you that hazard risk sum, but you can look at specific hazards. So maybe you want to look specifically at flood or hail. It'll show you where those historically those risks have been the highest. You can click this button to make a legend appear, and then you can search for your community to learn more about the challenges that it might face. So I'll go to New Haven, Connecticut, and that'll zoom in and show you those potential risks. So I encourage you to check that out to get a good lay of the land of some of the risks in your community. Another tool is FEMA's National Flood Hazard Layer. And high risk zones here are noted as zones beginning in A or V. And properties in these areas have a 26% chance of flooding over the next 30 years. And the properties in these areas would be required to purchase a flood insurance policy if they have a federally backed mortgage. And these maps also show areas with moderate to low risk areas as well. However, if you're outside of one of those high risk areas, you're not necessarily completely in the clear. There are several undetermined risk areas where flood risk hasn't been assessed, and those are noted with zones that are noted as these. So I encourage you to check it out and be aware of how close your property is to these potential zones to help you prepare accordingly. Another tool you may find helpful is NOAA's Storm Surge Risk Map. If you live in a coastal area, this can help you identify the potential storm surge that could occur if a hurricane of varying intensity were to strike your region. And these maps ultimately demonstrate that storm surge can impact communities many miles inland from the coast. So now that you have an understanding of some of the trends that we're seeing and tools to help you begin your planning efforts, your next step is to begin mitigating these risks. So to help you develop your plan, I'm going to pass it off to Mary, who's going to share some strategies you can adopt to help protect your properties and residents.
Hey, great. Thank you, Kelly. So as Kelly mentioned, I'm going to speak just briefly on some of the physical things you can do to help mitigate the impact of these natural disasters. So there's a lot at risk for housing organizations and property management teams, from damage to infrastructure, resident displacement, insurance claims, and there can also be reputational damage if your organization doesn't have a plan in place to respond to these disruptions. So while we of course can't control the weather, we can control how well our buildings and properties are prepared to handle these extreme weather events. So let's start with resiliency in new developments. One of the most effective ways to reduce losses from natural disasters is to build resilience into the design phase and thinking proactively before construction begins. Making resilient focused choices early on will be much more cost effective than retrofitting later down the road. So you can start by implementing the latest building codes recommended by the International Code Council. These are regularly updated to reflect emerging risks, especially climate-related ones. And then beyond codes, consider other design features that can help minimize damage. Elevating buildings and equipment, installing effective drainage systems, and incorporating physical barriers can all make a big difference. And then finally, design with the future in mind, not just for today's conditions. So really try and think ahead to how the environment may change over time and build to withstand those changes. You can go on to the next. So extreme heat events are becoming more frequent and more intense. So it's important to implement strategies to protect both your buildings and your people. One effective approach is to install multi-pane windows and pairing these with window shades, which will help reduce the amount of heat entering a building. Having adequate insulation throughout the building is also key because it helps maintain stable indoor temperatures, and this is especially important in older buildings. Better insulation also means lower energy bills, which is an added plus. In the event of power outages, backup power systems are essential to ensure that cooling systems can continue operating, especially for vulnerable populations who may be more sensitive to heat. If cooling the entire building isn't practical, you can also designate specific rooms as cooling zones with fans or portable AC units, and then also creating outdoor shaded areas as an alternative. And then finally, don't forget about your staff. So adjusting work schedules to avoid the warmest parts of the day and incorporating frequent breaks can go a long way in protecting their health. And also make sure that your employees know the signs of heat exhaustion and heat stroke and what to do in those situations. So you can go on to the next, Kelly. So flooding is one of the most frequent and costly natural disasters, as we heard from Kelly earlier. And while you can't stop floods from happening, there are things you can do to protect your properties and hopefully reduce the extent of damage. So floods can really wreak havoc on your building equipment like HVAC systems, electrical panels, boilers, etc. So elevating this equipment above the known flood level, either on platforms or relocating them to higher floors, can help prevent costly damage and reduce downtime. And this is especially important in basements and ground level utility rooms, which are usually the first to flood. It's also important to inspect building foundations and ensure that they're properly sealed to resist any water intrusion. Any moisture entering your building can lead to mold growth, structural concerns, and then just general deterioration over time. Stormwater drainage systems also play a key role. A well-functioning drainage system is your first line of defense during heavy rainfall. So you want to make sure that you're scheduling your routine maintenance so that drains stay clear of any debris or vegetation. And then lastly, consider installing sewage backflow protection valves. So flooding can really overwhelm municipal water systems, causing sewage to back up into buildings. So installing backflow protection can block contaminated water from entering your property, and this protects the health and safety of your people, as well as avoiding some of that costly cleanup. Go on to the next. Okay, so in recent years, wildfires have become more severe, especially in those regions prone to drought and high winds. So preparedness is really essential for this. For new construction, you can choose fire-resistant materials for roofs, sidings, and decks. This can all help reduce the risk of ignition, and you can also retrofit older buildings with fire-resistant upgrades. Landscaping is a very important wildfire mitigation tool, and creating defensible space is one of the most effective ways to protect buildings from wildfire. So defensible space refers to the area surrounding a building where vegetation, debris, and other combustible materials have either been removed or managed in an effort to slow the spread of wildfire and protect that structure. So it's a buffer zone that helps prevent flames from reaching the building. It reduces the chance of ignition from embers, and it also provides access for emergency responders. It's usually broken down into different zones based on the distance from the building, but it generally involves things like removing flammable materials like mulch and dead vegetation, trimming trees, and spacing shrubs and plants far enough apart to prevent that quick spread of fire. Property owners are responsible for maintaining this space, and in many wildfire-prone areas, it is required by law. So always just check with your jurisdiction for your specific requirements. And indoor air quality is also a concern during wildfires. So even if the flames don't reach your property, smoke and other pollutants can be a serious health hazard, especially those vulnerable populations. So installing air purifiers and having working smoke and carbon monoxide detectors can help safeguard your indoor environments. The last area I'll address is severe wind events, including tornadoes and hailstorms. So these can strike with little warning and can cause a lot of damage in just a matter of minutes. One smart investment is impact-resistant shingles, which are engineered to withstand the force of hail and flying debris. They do cost more upfront, but they do offer significantly better protection for your roof during this type of weather, and it can help you to avoid those costly repairs or even full roof replacements in some cases after a storm. So if you are planning a roof replacement in the future, you may want to consider this option. Then beyond the roof, other parts of the building are also vulnerable to wind and flying debris. So you can upgrade to storm-rated windows and doors with reinforced frames and shatter-resistant glass. And you can also use wind-rated siding that offers a little more durability. And then vehicles are another concern. So if possible, move your fleet into garages, carports, or any other covered area. It's also important to secure outdoor items like furniture, storage, barbecue grills, also any dead tree limbs. These can all become dangerous projectiles during high winds and result in both property damage as well as the potential for injury. And then, of course, having a designated storm shelter or safe room can be life-saving during this type of extreme weather. Having an actual storm shelter is more common in those tornado-prone areas. So if a permanent shelter isn't feasible, you can still instruct everyone to head to an interior room without windows, and that can serve as your temporary safe zone. You can go on to the next. So just to wrap up, we talked about some physical strategies for making properties more resilient to disasters, but the operational side is just as important, and ensuring your business can continue functioning after that disaster has passed. And that's where a strong business continuity plan comes in. It ensures that your organization can respond quickly, maintain essential services, and recover faster. So whether it's a wildfire, cyber attack, or extended power outage, having a plan in place can really mean the difference between just a temporary setback and a long-term crisis. So today we have some great sessions lined up that will guide you through the business continuity planning process. And our experts will highlight key areas your plan should cover and also offer practical steps for building a strategy that fits your needs. So before we close out our first session, I'm going to see if any questions came up. And Kelly, if you had anything else that you wanted to discuss.
Thanks for that great overview of some of the strategies. And my colleague Kate has been dropping some links in the chat for topics that we've discussed today. I encourage you to check out those tools that were mentioned and HAI Group's risk management resources to learn more about what your organization can do to develop a business continuity plan and mitigate against these risks. And all attendees will be sent an email following the event with the slides and links shared throughout the presentation. So if you don't have, if you're not able to save them right now or came in late, everyone will be followed up with those resources. Are there any questions?
I'm not seeing any questions that have come in. So we'll go ahead and wrap up this session. Thank you so much, Kelly, for sharing your research and your expertise with us. Very informative. Up next at 12 p.m. Eastern, it's going to be a panel discussion on a business continuity plan in action. So you're all already registered for the next session unless you opted out, and you should have received a Zoom reminder earlier today with access details and the link for that session. So thank you all for attending, and we'll see everyone in our next session.